Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Duncan. I'm a product manager with VMware here in Atlanta. I'm responsible for what we call workspace IoT, which includes enterprise wearable technology. For the next hour or so, this session, I'm going to help moderate a panel focused on the technical considerations of implementing XR technology in the enterprise. Joining me today are four gentlemen that have been living and breathing enterprise wearables for years now, and they've got scars to prove it. But let's go around the table and let each of them kind of introduce themselves. I'll start off first. We'll start with Seth Patin, he's CEO and founder of Logisitiview.
Well, as John mentioned, great to be here and talking about enterprise security on wearable devices. I'm the founder and CEO of Logisitiview. We're a software company that builds a platform for leveraging wearable devices in logistics and manufacturing operations.
Cool. Thank you, Seth. All right, next up, let's go to William Harding, the Distinguished Technical Fellow with Medtronic.
Hi, I'm William Harding here in sunny Arizona. I'm a Distinguished Technical Fellow, Emeritus Chair for the Technical Fellows Organization for Medtronic. Medtronic is the largest in the world device manufacturer for cardiac, neuro, spinal, and diabetes. And we started looking into XR, what we call extended reality technology, virtual, augmented, and mixed reality back about 2014, 2013. Some of the biggest challenges we're dealing right now is with training in our operators for production folks, helping our doctors in clinical scenarios. And what I'm looking to get out of this conference is the ability to collaborate with potential partners, learn more from my colleagues, and even present some of the barriers and things that you might need to overcome in order to effectively implement such a system.
Awesome. Thanks, William. All right, next up, Ken Fast, Principal Engineer, General Dynamics.
Hi there, I'm Ken Fast. I work at Electric Boat. We design and build nuclear submarines for the U.S. Navy. Electric Boat's been in business for over 120 years. And we actually have a long history with XR technology. So we started back in the early 90s with a large-scale electronic mock-up for our submarine design. And in the last 7 years or so, we've been implementing AR technology. So we have some production tools that we built. We're using augmented reality in production on the shop floor in the shipyard for building submarines. We have a couple of applications that we've developed and are using on a regular basis.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Ken. Okay, and last but not least, John McGuire, Senior IT Architect, Cybersecurity at Duke Energy.
Yeah, I kind of came at this an odd way. I'm a cybersecurity guy that found augmented and virtual reality. So instead of trying to make sure it doesn't happen, I've been finding ways to still manage risk and make it happen and turn into one of the biggest proponents, I think, in the company for these technologies.
Awesome. All right, appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and get into questions. we're going to start with you, William. We want to start with the, kind of the topic of du jour here. Want you to talk about kind of your biggest IT and security challenges when it came to implementing XR in Medtronics, and a little bit of how you overcame those barriers.
Perfect. Actually, it's a great question. So, one of the biggest issues we had was how XR wasn't really understood. We had to demystify it, basically, and help people understand that it's really just another input or display type device, vmware is an example, where it actually then exposed the potential for instance, if I'm in a surgical environment, that I might be capturing content around a patient that might be classified as HIPAA related or patient secure data, or even the things when I'm in manufacturing and as you're looking around, and helping a person train in a new process automation or a product assembly, that you might be seeing things like trade secrets. You might be interfering with the high-speed transfer of data that we do for traceability and compliance in manufacturing Class 3 medical and Class 3, 1, and 2 medical devices for patients. So when we started looking at that, we realized there was a lot more that we need to understand around the patient data protection, the IP in the company, and even the visual aspects. So when you look at, you're looking at a patient with a unique tattoo, or you're looking at elements that could be identifier, what really needed to be protected. Ultimately, we started utilizing what the IEEE standards around like 2933 is doing with TIPS, which is trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, security, and how we could apply that philosophies or standards around interoperability and technology integration.
That's great. So one of the other things curious about, I know you had talked about this a little bit when we were prepping for this, but curious on Medtronic side, the kind of the human or change management and organizational barriers that you were able to overcome with some of your XR deployments as well. If you could talk to that a little bit.
Oh, of course. And that's actually an excellent question. And a lot of people don't really consider when we think about the fun part of XR. And you start saying, well, wait a minute, now I have to really put this in place. And how am I going to do that through my global security offices? How am I going to do that with different infrastructures or facilities all around the world? And one of the biggest things, when we overlooked and didn't realize until later, was these are really cool technologies, but they're really nothing but shell technology if you don't have the content. And the content really was that digital content, such as documents, 3D digital twins, video stills, all those elements, avatars, whatever, is we have to create those. And those were the long lead time items that we really needed to understand more about, which then led to a very clear need for mobile device management. So the devices, the head-mounted displays, the mobile devices such as tablets and phones, and even the digital content library. So how we revision control that, how we role-based information, how we make sure that if we're manufacturing a part and utilizing XR technology to do that, that I have a one-to-one relationship to every individual resistor, every element that's going to go in a patient, that I know where it came from, that it is only one entity of that, and it's not duplicated throughout the system, losing revision control and whatnot. So it was a lot more behind the scenes that we really didn't take for granted. And then ultimately, even the partnerships, making sure the relevant stakeholders were involved. This is not an all IT function. I had to have the supervisors, operators, all those voices involved. And I'm not saying boil the ocean with too many cooks, but you have to have the proper appreciation for relevant stakeholders before implementation. So it's assessment, design, development, deployment, integration, and then sustainability.
Sure. That's great. No, appreciate that. It's awesome. Awesome experience for sure. So I want to switch over to Ken. I'm curious. Ken, obviously with Electric Boat, you deal with the Department of Defense, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure you got to spend a little time talking about, we talk about securing highly sensitive data and data classifications, other things that you can share, only the things you can share, of course, related to that.
Yeah, I have 3 pictures that I use over and over again in all my presentations because they're the only ones that have been approved for public release. So yeah, we have some security issues, but I guess in the big picture, what I'd like to talk about is that there are ways to get things done, right? So we're in a very tightly controlled environment, network-wise and software-wise, what we're allowed to use, but there's still ways to get things done, and we don't break the rules, but we work out on the boundaries of what's allowable, and there's a certain mindset of thinking that you can actually make something work. So a couple of examples. So that all of these, we're using, the current work is with augmented reality, and all of the devices have a camera, so they're doing pass-through video. And cameras, if you ask anyone in our plant about a camera, they say cameras aren't allowed, can't have a camera. Well, at first blush, that's true, but it's not entirely true. So you can get a permit to have a camera, and there's a process to go through. You have to apply, and you have to get approvals and signatures and whatnot, and then you get this little pink slip of paper, and then you have approval to use the camera. So we actually went and got camera passes for these devices that we're using, and that allowed us to use them in production areas. That so it was at, when you first ask a question, they say, well, it's not allowed, but if you push, it is allowed, and there's ways to make it happen. The first devices that we were using were Google Tango devices. So these are Android tablets and phones. and we're a Windows shop, and Android was bad, and they considered them insecure. And so again, if you ask the question, can we use these? The answers would be no. But we came up with a plan of physical security. So we only had a limited number of devices. So we had a check-in, check-out policy. We had people assigned to a device. Their name was on a list. They signed off that they were taking possession of the device. So we knew where it was. It got locked up at night. And we were able to get approval to use them on a limited basis of dedicated applications used by a handful of people. Basically, one person has one device that they use all the time. And so we were able to get that approved through security. The data, a lot of our data most of our data is not classified, but it is, it's export controlled, and it is sensitive data. So there's a lot of concern about data. But the interesting thing with augmented reality is that most of the data involved is the real world, right? So, and you see that through video. You don't have to have that on your device. You're seeing the real world in this pass-through video, and what you're adding is they're little parts. So we add a little bit of geometry for a part and a label for a part name, and it's really a very small amount of geometry. And because it's isolated geometry, doesn't have a lot of properties to it. It shows up in the right place, which is its value, but it's really in and of itself not as sensitive as most of the data on our network. So again, we're able to get approval to do that. And even networking, so Wi-Fi is, we do have Wi-Fi in most of our production areas, but it's not complete coverage. But again, because the amount of data that you're putting on the device is limited, you really don't need a network connection. You can install all this data ahead of time, and the device knows where it is, it does its job, and you refresh the device on a periodic basis offline, and that works fine. So there's, the big idea is even though it's a complex environment, it's a difficult environment to get new things done. It's very risk averse, but there are ways to get everything done, and it's just a matter of pushing at it and finding out the right procedures and offering alternatives and writing up detailed process instructions and getting approvals to those that we were able to get a lot of work done, even though the first answer is always no, can't be done.
Right. Yeah. No, I got a kick out of, like I said, when you're talking about no cameras and the fact that it's actually only pass-through video. You're not storing that, and the realization that, well, it's not sensitive because there's nothing being stored, nothing being sent, about the actual environment. So yeah, it's awesome points for sure. All right, I want to get to Seth here. I'm curious, Seth, being the only kind of software vendor on the panel here, I wanted to get your opinion on what you think what obligation do XR software vendors like Logisitiview, obviously, have when it comes to security around customer deployments and things?
Well, I think it's a really great question. I mean, in short, our job is to make my job is to make these three guys' job easier if they try to deploy my software. Security in and it doesn't just apply to XR. I think one of the things that I think William very clearly articulated was these devices are not revolutionary. We've been using smartphones for over 10 years now, and most XR devices are in essence glorified smartphones, or maybe even maybe if you go to a VR headset, a glorified laptop. But at the end of the day, these are not truly new, revolutionary, unheard of devices. They're just devices across which there's a broader attack surface than any other device in your enterprise, because they're mobile, because physical security is a concern, obviously network and digital security is a concern. And so from our perspective, we have to provide solutions as a software vendor that cover all of those contingencies. Giving opportunities to manage physical security by tracking devices, by having the ability to track who's using the devices, by having the ability to track what the devices are being used for throughout the course of executing a logistics or manufacturing process with our software. And then from a digital perspective, our software has to be resilient to, the typical hacking nonsense that happens, to every one of our businesses every single day. The reality is that cybersecurity is not, it's not even unique to large enterprises. I mean, I have, my small company has probably just as many random cyber attacks as Electric Boat does. Probably fewer that are as targeted as perhaps you guys have, but nonetheless, we're all, no one's immune. And so you have to build software with the idea that, one, this is going to happen. Certainly if you have a cloud component, which Logisitiview does, then you have to be aware of data transfer and ensure that data transfer is secure. You need to be aware of data storage, make sure that it is not internet, it's not internet facing. You need to secure communications between the devices. Our software locks down the device and ensures that it's used for only the thing that it's intended to be used for. And all communication out of that device is secured and encrypted. Why? Because we don't want any data that is being transferred, even though it's mostly just logistics and and manufacturing transactional data. Nonetheless, it could be considered certainly confidential. And so all of our customers are looking for evidence and proof that if they deploy our technology, that they don't have to constantly be looking over their shoulder to say, hey, is Logisitiview letting in the bad guys? And it's our job as a software vendor, and I really think this applies to the entire XR industry, because if we want this to be adopted in enterprise, truly adopted by large enterprise, we have to adopt the security practices of a large enterprise customer. And starting off with POCs and great tech, and and the excitement of how great that tech is, and how great it feels to be able to see and interact with a computer in an entirely new way. Once you get over that, you then have to go back to the really, really mundane work of ensuring that when you do when you have the ability to do all those things, that it follows every other standard process that enterprise software has to follow. And so that's what we've had to really focus on heavily and become experts in ourselves. I think that's an obligation of the software vendor, is to not put security on your customer, but rather come to the customer with a clear recommendation for the best way to manage security of the solution that you're providing.
Yeah, totally. I appreciate that. All right, we'll want to make sure to get to John, and I know, interesting, as Seth was talking about building software, and Duke has actually done quite a bit of that. And curious if you could share with us kind of some IT solutions, best practices around security and things that you guys have implemented at Duke with XR.
Right. Well, you can imagine stodgy old electric utility trying to do something new isn't necessarily what was on the agenda. A few years ago, though, we started up this digital transformation group. It's just 4 or 5 people. It's up to a couple hundred people in the group now, and it's got a lot of focus because we've been successfully working with all the different lines of business, the gas business, transmission, distribution, customer delivery, to be able to build them solutions that solve some of their biggest problems. We do that with the newest technologies that are out there. For cybersecurity, it's easy to say no because you've got your set of controls in place. You know how to manage these things you already do. So having to think through something new is difficult. How do you manage risk in a new environment with new stuff? Some of the tools like Seth's talking about are essential, but we have to try and find ways to find compensating controls, things that work to do what we need to do to still allow things like VR headsets and AR apps running on Android tablets that are just not allowed on our network, right? How do we still manage that risk? We've had good success. My role has been, my larger role outside of leading our virtual reality development team has been to help our cybersecurity organization find those solutions that they're comfortable with to allow our projects to move forward and that we're still managing our risk appropriately. We have mobile apps that are going out and hitting our customer databases that our customers love. It's been working out really well. We have other things that are on our business network. We have virtual reality headsets that are tethered to big, fat, company-managed Dell workstations that run on our company network with a couple of exceptions. We had to allow the Oculus headsets to go out and talk to Facebook to get updates. We had to allow the Steam tools to be able to go out and get through the gaming filter to be able to update their drivers, right? But we were able to implement that to allow our nuclear engineers to work in a digital twin of their nuclear plant to take measurements and plan workout. So, where we've been able to put things on the network like that, we have. Where we haven't, all of our virtual reality solutions right now are still off network. We either use mobile hotspots or we use Wi-Fi wherever we are setting. And I'm using Wi-Fi at the house here for mine. But if we need to connect to internal systems, then we build a secure bridge. We have an API connection where we can load the results of somebody's training session from the VR headset to put that back in a back-end database and eventually dump that into our learning management system to log their completion of a course. We've been able to develop solutions on VR headsets. Actually, we think we have the first in an industry. Our gas organization has qualified 4 people now to go out and walk down gas pipelines and look for potential problems, potential leaks. We built that app in virtual reality. They're doing their qualification in virtual reality in a VR headset, a mobile VR headset. And they're able to do that because the headset doesn't need to be on the company network. We're kind of outside of that security requirement. That's kind of going around some of our problems. We are hitting them directly as well, right? So we have a long list of development tools that we're using, which are verboten on company computers because they're considered gaming solutions, right? And there's no real distinction between a tool you use for a legitimate enterprise purpose and one you use for gaming. I'm still trying to track down who owns that policy so I can get it adjusted, right? But in the meantime, we're still trying to get those tools all approved through our normal enterprise architecture, cybersecurity, modern architecture practices and processes so that they're sanctioned use tools inside the organization. And at the same time I'm doing that for our VR tools, there's a number of other things that we use in digital transformation that we need to get approved too. So we're running them all through that process. It's kind of a matter of you've got to do extra work to make this work in an enterprise. You have to be able to get everybody past be able to find their solutions for them, frequently do their job for them, and be able to hand them a complete solution that answers all their questions and solves all of their problems.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, and yeah, that's perfect. And I think it's one of the reasons why I love having you guys together and talk about this stuff is because everybody has different stories, different anecdotes, different ways that they either work with or against their organization to get things in and push this technology through. And yeah, it's awesome hearing all of that for sure.
The thing to say is it is possible. It's not impossible. So
yeah,
that's what we've all kind of been able to tell you here.
I like what you were saying there, Seth, John, also, because looking at a lot of the issues with Alienware or other high-end gaming systems, we get them validated. I look at the scenarios of us using eGPUs and other methods to try to take a standard Dell or Apple system and then give it the power you need without violating any sort of the company security. So it's impressive what you guys are doing to overcome that.
It took about 6 months to get that system agreed on between the workstation support group, cybersecurity, and all teams. So yeah,
that's great. All right, I want to go back to William. I'm curious. One of the things we want to talk about is we talk about security and obviously with XR and these devices, a lot of these devices anyway. Curious if you could comment on at what point in your deployment did you implemented device management and if you could talk a little about the role that it played in success of your deployment.
Yeah, and that we got to consider that, and probably put this in perspective. Medtronic's 100,000 employees. We've got 80 manufacturing facilities around the world, all the various languages. We were on calls with Galway in Germany this morning on some of their needs, Singapore last night. And as we're looking at all this content and everybody, one of the big barriers we had was, okay, well, you can't acquire this type of technology in India. So how are you going to get that? Or I've got certain areas on a HoloLens I can't ship to Italy. So when it looked at managing these devices to say, well, are we going to have to create a special one just for extended reality? In reality, we found that our mobile device management system for making sure where something is, whether we need to destroy it, empty it, update it, whatever, make sure it's compliant, really fit well within our mobile device management system. However, there's always the however. When we look at our closed loop manufacturing environments, and similar to what John's having to deal with, is we can't have vendors dialing in. COVID is keeping my vendors from traveling with their new equipment. And when we're looking at process validation, virtual auditing, all these areas, even robotics, as we're tying this into our IoT type systems, we realized it was much more than just saying, hey, this is like another phone, this is a BYOD to bring your own whatever. We couldn't do that. So we really had to be more like, this is our compliance. We're doing insane deep dives. It reminds me of the days I worked in missile and drug interdiction, for similar to what Seth's, what Ken's having to do with, to say, how are we going to protect this type of equipment and data relative to compromise? And so when it really came down to it, we realized we had to look at a lot of vendors, look at a lot of solutions. We do have nice homegrown, but there are a lot of other companies. I'll use like TurboSquid or Sketchfab and some of these organizations that do really nice for their content management. They also had some really good mobile device management. So we were able to implement some degree of that. The other thing we had to deal with is our acquisitions of companies. So as we acquire new companies, we have to fold them in comfortably, roll them in comfortably. We just can't cold turkey say you're now using this Medtronic policy. So there was a lot of things being faced. We are, like John, having to kind of compromise little areas and until we can get everybody up to speed on utilizing the right systems. But we are finding it is easing now that we have roughly 45 projects successfully deployed in hospital and manufacturing systems. So it's one of those things where don't overshoot. Look at what you're doing right now. Do your evaluations out there against some of the providers that are doing a great job. And this type of scenario of sharing some of the barriers, obstacles that were overcome is some of the things that really helped us get past that and to where we are now.
Yeah. So Ken, also kind of same question to you around device management. I know you were talking about the move from how Windows 10 was standard and you had moved to Android. So can you comment on the same?
Yeah. So mobile device management, we, the comment was made about, these aren't unusual devices. They're just like smartphones. Well, we were not allowed to have smartphones, camera phones at our desk inside the plant until I don't know, it's made 3 years ago. They changed the policy. So you've never seen so many flip phones in your life. And a lot of people still have flip phones. They're hard to find these days.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so mobile device management would have been the next step. So we're using these Android devices, Tango devices. We do have had company phones. We had BlackBerry phones that were on an MDM system for years, and those are being switched over to iPhones now. So the plan was that we would test out our Android devices using the MDM that we already have in place for these other company phone devices. And we were just never a high enough priority on the IT side to get any of their time to do that. And in the meantime, we're transitioning our AR platform to a Windows tablet. So we're using some external cameras and external tracking software, so that the plan moving forward is that we'll have standard IT assets that are Windows devices that also run AR. So the Android devices are going to kind of fade away. One of our sister companies, so Bath Iron Works, also part of General Dynamics, they're up in Maine. They did take some of these Tango devices and put them on their MDM system, and it worked just fine. So they were able to run their AR tools inside of the secure container, connect to their network, and that worked for them fine. So I'm sure it would have worked. We didn't get to it. We were not important enough in the big scheme of things.
Well, all right. So we're gonna move on. I want to ask a question about futures. Before I do, because the advantage of working at home is I've got my museum of old tech, and I'll send this to you, Ken. See, I just found.
Yeah, there you go.
Gotta love the
pink razor. That's exactly what you need. Okay, so last thing I want to have everybody touch on here. We want to go talk a little bit about. I'm gonna go back to you, John. talk about future innovations that you're seeing. What do you think we're going to see that's going to help kind of increase the adoption in the XR space?
Well, I was looking around here for my telegraph receiver. I've actually
Right.
got it.
I can keep digging over here if you want. I've got a whole pile of stuff.
I've got my share of old tech around too. I don't think I have an old flip phone handy. I could probably dig one up out of a drawer somewhere. Future state, we're seeing nothing but acceleration. But we're seeing good support for that, right? So we've kind of settled on Oculus Quest headsets. We've got new Quests coming out that are providing us even better visibility and real reality and immersion than what we've got with the current version. But our vendor is also providing mobile device management, right? So their own tools for managing enterprise stuff. It's not quite baked yet. We're trying to help them come along for some of the things that we need that aren't available yet, but we've got a really good relationship to build that. So I see that continuing into the future quite a bit. I've also found that some of these things that have been around for a while, a RealWear HMT1 that we our emerging technologies group, the business side of a digital transformation group, has been trying to get people interested in for years and hadn't really taken off. We're all of a sudden seeing interest in that because COVID restrictions mitigation has made all of these value statements for these technologies that much greater, if not a multiple of this addition, adding to it, if not making it a multiple. So we have people now who are piloting using an HMT1 up on a 400-foot wind turbine. I'm trying to print off clips that'll latch it onto their climbing helmets that they wear up there so that they can work with a crew on the ground using Microsoft Teams and capture images for new procedures for the wind turbines that we have down in South Texas. We've got other crews that are using HoloLens to go do remote inspections for NERC-CIP stuff and whatever, right? So there's a lot of different ways that these technologies become more important, using drones for remote inspections instead of having a bunch of people working in a small space. There's going to be a lot of drive just based on pandemic mitigation, I think, for moving a lot of these technologies forward.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's Seth. Do you mind chiming in on the same thing, future innovations question?
Yeah, I mean, there's, John hit a lot of them right on the head. I mean, our industry, more in the, like that in-building, in-four-wall logistics and manufacturing space, what we're seeing is increased demand for flexibility and increased demand for whole solutions or whole products. And I think one of the things that's going to drive that innovation adoption is the reality that, over the last couple of years, XR has become far less of a fringe use case or a fringe scenario on quote unquote cool devices, and now it's becoming a native part of things like warehouse picking or line assembly. And so, in the Logisitiview platform, you can use an XR device or you can, use a standard tablet. But when we show people that you can use both, they tend to lean towards the XR device, the wearable device, because it is hands-free. It's more useful. It's more flexible. But the reason it becomes easier to adopt is because it's already part of a larger holistic platform that has a clear business case. And so what we're finding overall is that as COVID especially drives the need for flexibility, the need for rethinking what you did in the past. There's no better time than a pandemic to kind of get hit in the face with the reality that what got you here won't get you there. And I think that's where next generation computing technologies, the kind of ones that we've been doing for the last 10 years, as in the XR community. But these devices are becoming recognized as the future, and more that's not something we have to convince people of. It's now just something that we have to show them and explain how it fits into the big picture. I think that the next decade is only going to bring more and more of that as the standardized solutions provided by software vendors become more and more capable, and the standardized development tools leveraged by all of you specialists in the practitioner community become more and more capable as well. So.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I know, and William, I'm curious on your side as well as how you see or what you think is going to be driving kind of the increased adoption in this new normal as well. I
actually wrote myself a note on that. I I'm speaking with some people the other day, and some of our patent lawyers, and I realized they had no clue what I was trying to demonstrate. And I like referring back to an Einstein quote that says, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. And it really was the magic when it came to improving adoption. So when I was dealing with my regulatory, my quality people, my IT folks, management stuff, it all came back down to explain it in terms that they understood, that it was relatable. If I'm showing a manufacturing process, I'm not going to demonstrate a surgical intervention. If I'm trying to really show the value propositions or the problem statements we're trying to address, I really need to make it relatable. And I'll give it a nice credit to some of the training that my teams have been provided, around design thinking and human-centered design, is these methods have really allowed us to bring all those voices together. And you can see I use my hands too much, but in either case, bringing everybody together and making sure that, they all were on the same page. It's literally, when I'm trying to explain a patent, I use AR and VR technology even right now to help explain a new design. And once I started, really, it's back to that thing about demystifying or explain it simply. People start to get it. Yesterday, even some of our VPs had these aha moments, and they said, now I understand what you're talking about. So I know we all like this technology, but resist the urge to overcomplicate it and make this much more magical. Now, I'll be honest with you, on some of the adoption areas is we do some razzle dazzle, and it's really nice to practice that show, don't tell, and say, well, let me show you what it's going to be like, and why don't you experience this firsthand? So, trying to do that is really what's helped us overcome a lot of these barriers, and literally encouraged all these teams to come to us and say, in no exaggeration, we have money. How do you want to spend it? It's like, okay, right. I like that problem.
Good problem to have, for sure.
Exactly.
A little bit of that too, even with pre-economy the way it is. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, if there's any other thoughts, and if anybody heard anything, want to share, we can go to Q&A.
I want to connect to these guys later. the things I'm hearing, and can you give me flashbacks on the military stuff we used to do? I'm like, okay, a little scared again. But specifically, even the things, John, you're doing is, I couldn't hear Seth, unfortunately, but, what this team is doing, I want to encourage definitely a follow-up, some sort of, we do these consortiums all the time, and, I open my doors to any sort of collaboration. So really impressed with my colleagues here.
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely.
It's unfortunate that we don't have the opportunity to sit around together and have beers tonight at the end of the conference.
Yeah, no kidding.
Virtual beers.
Some VR chat or something we can all get into and have a conversation in the future.
I have to add, I saw a really cool demonstration. If you look at things like Meet in VR or Author and some of the other VR type of experiences with avatars and wrapped videos, I saw a really neat one from Cisco the other day that is just mind-blowing in real-time avatar that I think we could get around that virtual beer situation pretty quickly.
It's
Yeah.
kind of amazing.
As long as we could keep it off of the corporate network.
Yeah. Well, now that we're working from home.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, my wine cabinet is right there. There's 180 bottles waiting.
What's better than old phones? I need to change up my room here.
When he pulled up that flip, I was going to bring out my Newton and say, hey, can I connect my Newton to this?
A lot of my job becomes easier working from home. So I just switch offices. I've got the home office, the work office, and depending on which work I need to do, a lot of my work is easier to do on my home machine without having to wait until I get home to do it.
I got a quick question for you guys. In the areas of Six Sigma, Cardboard City, and design and cell operating systems, have you guys anybody been using VR, AR, XR type stuff for those designs? We've been getting into it, and it's pretty successful.
No, data visualization and some other things are areas that would probably be another area that would be interesting to get into, but I haven't seen that happening yet.
Okay. Well, I'll demonstrate it sometime for you if you guys ever want. We'll have little sessions. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Definitely. All right, well, guys, really appreciate it. I think we still should have time for some Q&A here. So again, thanks so much for your time, and thank you guys for joining us. Look forward to your questions. Appreciate it.